Go ahead, bro.
Hi, my name is TJ. My dad died of overdose on January 1st, 2011, and my mom is a recovering addict. God helped my mom, and now together we are here to help you. Now let's talk recovery. Here's your host, my mom, Susan Sexton-Wood.
Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk Recovery. I'm your host, Susan Sexton-Wood. Our co-host today is Timothy Johnson, and he goes by TJ. This is my 13-year-old son and has been a part of the ministry ever since we started back in 2013. We just celebrated this past December 4 years of being reunited when it comes to receiving custody back of my son. Our guest today is Craig Dusek. He is the pastor in Union City at the Nazarene Church. And I want to welcome Pastor Craig and TJ to the show.
Thank you.
Well, first off, I'm going to ask Pastor Craig to just share a little bit about his testimony. The more that I've gotten to know Pastor Craig, he definitely walks with God and does what he asked him to do. And so, Craig, would you share just your testimony? What led you to Christ?
I've always been someone, I was raised in a home. My mom and dad both were Catholic, non-practicing Catholic, so we didn't go to church. But there was definitely a strong influence of a godly life with them. And so as I was raised, went to high school, which is when I began having some issues with depression. Sought counseling and was involved with that for a while. And then went off to college, went to Ohio State, got involved with the Catholic student group there, and just as part of trying to figure out who I was going to be in life, what I was going to do as I was pursuing my engineering degree. And graduated, got out, got a job, ended up moving to the Dayton area, and just was missing something in my life. And so ended up getting back involved in 12-step recovery programs. Have been involved with it from my teenage years on up as family of someone with dealing with addiction. And met a friend who invited me to was a conference, a Christian conference, and had just that moment where I met Jesus. And I knew I needed to make a decision. And I had seen how he had been active in my life all along. And so I was able to just in that moment, I recognized Jesus for who he was and gave my life to him. And began following him. As part of that, ended up being discipled by some very strong mentors. Ended up in a number of 12-step groups. Worked with an AA sponsor working the 12 steps. That was an initial part of my discipleship and recovery training, and also with the pastor of the church I was attending. And he was the one that first recognized my call to ministry. Began exploring it there, met and married my wife, and kind of brought her along and said, this is part of who I am, meaning the 12-step program. And I was working with a group, it's called, the name escapes me now, but it was looking at the 12 steps as a pathway for Christian spiritual growth. And I was doing that at one church, and so I invited her to be a part of that. They had a group where they would go through one of the steps one week and then have a discussion group the following night. So that was kind of the start of our courtship, and we got married. Ended up changing from, we were at the Lutheran church to the Nazarene church, which is where I received my training. And really, in the past few years, since I was an engineer, I did bivocational. I've been at the church about 4.5 years, and in the past few years, since I've stepped back from my engineering career, I've had an opportunity to get more involved in different aspects of the recovery ministries in our community, starting with Reach All Randolph County with Pastor Jeff Bullard, and that's how we met. And I found out about your ministry, and then last year talking with you about getting the training as a certified peer specialist. And as we've continued to work together, also involved in Brianna's Hope there in Union City's chapter as part of the leadership team there. So that's...
And that's one thing that you want to see is, and to continue seeing, is the connection of different organizations coming together to combat the drug problem. You're in Union City, which is on the Indiana side, and it's a small town. But even a small town can be overrun with addiction, and so. What we have started to do in Union City is, as me and Pastor Craig have talked, is to bring one-on-one peer counseling also to that area. And Pastor Craig got certified last year as a recovery specialist and community health worker. And so what we do 2 hours a week as of now is we are in a community room in Union City where we have availability to sit down and work one-on-one with individuals on a recovery plan. And so Pastor Craig has now become a part of the ministry of Unchained Praises, and he is there to work one-on-one with individuals by using his certification, and as well as helping people with their struggles. And you struggle with depression. Would you like to share a little bit about that and just some of the things that you started doing to help you with your depression? Because in most cases, people that struggle with addiction have a mental illness too.
I was first diagnosed with depression as a teenager when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I was always kind of uncomfortable in my own skin. And I've noticed that there's been a trend, at 13, ended up seeing a psychiatrist, family support therapist. And then after that, things were okay until I was about my early 20s. And then when I was in college, I started struggling again. And just different factors kind of came into play, nothing really formal then. But when I was in my early 30s, a lot of different factors came through, but it was the first time that I actually made a plan to take my own life, and only by God's grace have I been saved from that. And one of the key aspects of my recovery from that, I did eventually see a counselor, but what was more important was I went to a Christian ministry that was a grief and depression support group. And it was by talking with them, hearing their stories, hearing how they handled it, that idea that I'm not alone, that there is a pathway through this. That was what really helped me escape that. And so that's kind of the attractiveness to peer counseling to me, was that we're not coming as experts. I think sometimes when people go to counselors, I know sometimes when I do, there's that sense that they don't really understand what we're talking about. And I think that as a peer specialist, that when we have the capability of telling our story and talking about the places we've been and how we've been through it, it really helps make that connection with the other person, to give them an opportunity to believe that there is something for them, that there is hope. And that was something that was so important to me. And the advantage for me practically is I've been around the 12-step recovery work. I've worked the steps myself, but I've been around as someone who's been affected as a family, but also who has seen the impact it's had on families. In our church, we've got a lot of children whose parents have lost custody. You mentioned that in your case as well. In dealing with those kids, trying to get them to understand that this is not something you did, that there still is a love for you there. They just don't know how to get past this hurdle in such a way to build that relationship with you. interacting with some of the parents who are just heartbroken for their children that are caught up in this, and being able to offer them hope, I think is very important, and just walking with them through it. How do you deal with the difficulty of taking care of a child that you want to support, you want to do the best thing, and walking that fine line between enabling, that I think it can be so difficult for parents. So that's a big part of my ministry in Union City. It's something that for whatever reason our church has a lot of people affected, and I think it's just because of the scope.
Right.
There's just a lot of people that are affected. But that was peer meeting, and that was a support group, less of a one-on-one, but that peer meeting was such an integral part of my recovery, that's a big part of what's motivated me to get involved in the work that we do now, and obviously what we've learned from each other in just the short time we've been doing it has broadened my horizons in how you approach recovery.
TJ, as he was just talking about all of the families that are just in his church with that aren't with their families because of an addiction, and how they have been taken away from their family. Can you share some of the things that you felt when you were going through that?
Well, because I was so young, I didn't really know what was going on at the time. Because I was 6. Then I got taken away for you, but I didn't know that I was actually gone because I was at my Aunt Connie's that was literally like 2 blocks away from you. Mm-hmm. So I thought I was just staying there for times because you just came and visit. But when she said you can't live with me, I got confused and everything. Then I went to tell us. I was like, oh, I guess I'm just staying here for like maybe a week and then I'm coming straight back. But next thing you know, I'm staying there for 2.5 years. I know that you've been doing drugs. My dad died of drugs. And then I was just sad and depressed like the whole entire time. Mm-hmm. Like after my year there, I started crying. That's when I began singing of depression. And then here I am now, a happy little boy.
Little, you're 13 now, so you're a teenager.
Happy little man.
Happy little man.
So you can relate to Pastor Craig then when he talked about depression hit him as a young man.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to ask him some questions about that?
I have nothing in mind right now that I could think of.
Well, I know that the more Pastor Craig and I sit down and talk as we're together once a week for the 2 hours, we have started to get some people that want to come and work on their personal recovery plan, but we have learned a lot from mm-hmm. each other, and I think the concept when it comes to a pastor is like they're a pastor. They got it all together and nothing ever happens and life is perfect. But I know that he's taught me a lot when it comes to that, is even pastors have to take time for themselves mm-hmm. and to work on their struggles mm-hmm. to do the job that they've been sent to do. And it means a lot when somebody is real. Mm-hmm. When I don't feel that it's sugar-coated or, mm-hmm. And that's what I feel with our relationship about helping, people. We sit there. If there's nobody that comes into the center that day, mm-hmm. then we just talk and we work through some of the mm-hmm. things that we may be struggling mm-hmm. with. And so that I just want to let you know that's a big deal to me. Mm-hmm. And it also shows when it comes to the 12-step programs that it can be used for more than just mm-hmm. drugs and alcohol.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I used it because I couldn't accept life on life's terms. That's mm-hmm. how I talk about it. But I didn't have a methodology. I didn't learn how to deal with disappointments. I didn't learn how to process those emotions that TJ was talking about, that, you have these things that happen to you. And you look at all your friends and it's easy to say, well, they seem so happy. They're not facing those same things. And then you wonder, what's wrong with you? Why are you different? Why are you suffering from this? And I think that's the importance for me was the 12 steps were a toolkit. They were a way that I could begin to processing some of those things and help me remove all the stuff that stood between me and God. When I made that decision to follow Jesus, I wanted to put him at my center of my life, but I didn't know how. Mm-hmm. I was, in my 20s, so I had built up all those bad habits, and so how to process all those things. And that's where the 12 steps really helped me. And it's something that I still use. This is a story from when I was beginning to preach on the 12 steps, and this was kind of a new concept for my church. A lot of people in my church just thought that people with addiction, why don't they just stop? They can make a different choice. And I really, it was very important to me because this had been so central to my life to do it right. And I had worked, up a sermon. I was talking about the first step, going to launch into the 12 steps. We're going to watch the series that I reference about using it as a pathway to spiritual growth. And I've got two boys, and they're very much boys, and they like to bounce around. I'm sure, like you do, very energetic. And
That's right.
So I had everything on a little flash drive, and my wife was reviewing my PowerPoint slides to make sure everything was all right. And he almost hit it, and we said, you can't jump on Mom right now. She's getting this. And of course, he came back 5 minutes later, completely forgetting about that, destroyed the flash drive. Mm-hmm. So here, my written sermon, all my notes, the PowerPoint, everything for tomorrow. This is Saturday night around 9:00, and I kind of went a little berserk, and you talk about pastors. Pastors are people. We're subject to the same disappointments and flaws as everybody else, just with a different calling. But it really was, everything. I'd put so much work into it, and I was yelling at my boy and yelling at just going around and acting crazy, and it came to a point where I had to work through those 12 steps. It was one of those points where it was a situation I was completely powerless over. I could not change it. I could not recover this. Nothing I had could make that right. And so I was powerless over the situation. Then I had to turn it over to God's care. And I believe that he could restore me to sanity, because running around my house screaming at people wasn't the sanity I was looking for. And then I had to think about, how it affected me doing those fourth and fifth steps, and trying to look at, because on that flash drive I had all our financial records, I had all our, there was a lot of information on it that was now lost. And of course, being someone who's very tech savvy and has a degree in engineering, I never backed it up, because that would make too much sense.
Right.
And so, but then I had to, so I said, okay, then going through that, I said, okay, God, this is my flaw. I was putting way too much trust in this, believing that God was somehow bigger, that he could handle this Sunday morning sermon. The creator of the universe might be able to take care of that. Just working through all those. And then, of course, 8 and 9, making those amends. Mm-hmm. I had to apologize to my son. I'm sorry that I made my flash drive more important to me than you. Apologizing to my wife for screaming and scaring her and scaring my son, and not in a violent way, but just I was very agitated. And I will tell you that, she was able to save the slides, so we were able to do that for the morning. I didn't have the notes, but when I went to bed, I had such a sense of peace. And getting up the next morning and just talking through that example. What better example of still having to use this? This is not something that we get a graduate, or we graduate from. We get a degree. Well, you're done. We've talked about the things that how far we've come, but how much work we still have left to do. The challenges that are still in front of us. And I think that can be a hopeful approach too. People need to recognize that. And one thing that you talk about, that recovery is a process, and it includes many different stages. And even if your sobriety date moves, you can hold on to that recovery date. You talk about fighting for that recovery, and that's an important thing for people to hear, that when you invest your time into doing this, that you're not wasting it, even if something happens down the road that causes you to take steps back. that that God's grace is there for us to fall on, and that He will continue, as long as we continue to seek Him, He will continue to meet us where we are and redeem us.
Yeah, that's just meet us where we are. That's a big thing for me to hear. I know when you were talking about recovery, and me and my husband was talking today, and I'm struggling with food addiction now, and I've gained probably more than 50 pounds now since last year. And we were just talking about recovery in general, and he said, when you make a decision and do something, to do something about it. And I said, everybody's not like that. I want to do something, but to put the pieces in place is hard. And I struggle with that because I have fought drug and alcohol addiction. And I just celebrated 5 years yesterday. And so when you look at that, well, it was Monday that I celebrated 5 years, but when you look at that, you would think that, okay, well, I did that, so this other struggle is going to be easy, but it's not. It's a whole other struggle. Right. And, even though I'm taking steps to figure out what it is I need to do, I know it's going to come together. And one thing that I've done is pray about it. Pray about it and what's God telling me. And He tells me that He's going to take that away too. It's just a matter of I need something different for that. And can the program of the 12 steps work? Can, a lot of things that I've done for my drug and alcohol addiction recovery work, it can. It's just a matter of where to start. I need that kickstart. I need something kind of laid out and help from other people to say, okay, this is kind of what you're going to do, and then start doing it, and I know that it's going to get better. But with saying that, everybody's different. We're different, and some people, it's great that people in recovery can learn, when you're tired of it, do something about it, and that you're able to just start doing something about it, and it starts beginning to get better. But a lot of us take a little bit more, and when it comes to that, I really look up to my husband when it comes to that, because he's a very hard worker, and when he says he's going to do something, he'll just start doing it. And so again, recovery is so different for everybody, and to know that you've gone through the 12-step program for what you struggle with just shows that it could be used for anything.
And what I liked about and what I needed from the 12-step program was that structure. Was here's something simple to do. This is the first step. This is how you do the first step. And we've exchanged the different methods we've used and kind of the detail they go into. I mean, that can be a lot, but just this basic structure of walking through, this is the next step, this is the next step, this is the next step. And that's what I needed, because I want to look at the end, and you get to the point where you start talking, people start talking, I've noticed in AA meetings and stuff, they'll start talking about doing the amendment. I can't go apologize to people. Well, have you done the other steps yet? Right. I mean, that you don't look to the end. We don't start there. You start at the beginning. And I think that one thing that I admire about you, and again, I think people have different ways of approaching God, and God talks to us in different ways based on the kind of personalities we have. And you are a very faithful person. I mean, when God tells you He's going to do something, you believe it and you act as if it's true. And because I'm an engineer, my scientific nature, I'm very skeptical. So that's a lot harder for me to do. You give me something in structure, with instructions on how to do, and I can do that. But believing that God is going to do something and stepping out in faith is a lot harder. I've done that, but it takes me a lot longer. And I think that's the beauty of the God that we serve, is that He meets us where we are. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and He's always willing to work with us with what we give Him. And He understands what I need. He understands what you need. And the beauty of ministry when we do it together is that we not only learn from one another, but that enables us to help other people may not have been able to engage with. And, just in dealing with the people that come to Brianna's Hope, I have a tendency to be very skeptical and pessimistic. But trying to rely on that God knows what he's doing, that he brought those people there. So many of them just want to get their form signed, but they still come there out of all the options they have. And that God has kind of worked my life. The interesting thing is when I first became a Christian, one of the churches had me go through a spiritual gifts inventory, and they walk through and try to identify that ministry. And everybody was sitting there thinking about it. And for me, it was I want to be involved in recovery, and how my life had led me away from that. And now here I am in the midst of kind of a transition, finding myself right back in the thick of it, right where God needs me to be. And so I think that, all these different problems people have that they face, God is passionate. He cares about them. He cares about them all. He cares about each individual and what their personal problem is. Whether it's something that we would term as big as drug and alcohol, or something that can be as disquieting as food or any host of a number of different things, that he cares about those things, and he wants to help us be free from those things. He doesn't want us to be enslaved to anything. Right. He wants us to worship him, to freely follow him, and nothing else will love us the way that he does. And I think it's a beautiful image to keep in mind when we deal with people in recovery, because their lives are so dark. And I'm sure you can testify to that as well. Just that it's so easy to get caught up in that and not see the beauty of the God that really is calling out to all these people.
Right. Well, I want to thank you, Pastor Craig, for being here and being a part of the ministry of Unchained Praises. I know that I cannot do this by myself, and God started Unchained Praises so there are more people able to help individuals do the one-on-one recovery plan, and from different aspects. You may not have struggled with addiction, but you have had a struggle. Thanks, TJ, for being on the show and talking a little bit.
Yeah, just a little.
We want to thank you for just watching the Let's Talk Recovery show. Pastor Craig is available to work one-on-one with individuals, whether you are struggling with depression or you struggle with an addiction. There are many different struggles, as you heard him say. And so not only am I here to help people work that one-on-one recovery plan, but Pastor Craig is too. And sometimes you can just feel comfortable, whether it's a man talking to a man or a woman talking to a woman. And so I'm very, very blessed that God has opened the door for Pastor Craig to come alongside of us, because he is the only male at this time that's certified in working the one-on-one recovery plans. So if you are struggling and you need help, just reach out to us. You can get on the Facebook page, or you can call the number on the screen. All of the information is on our Facebook page for Unchained Praises. And so you have a blessed day, and thank you again for being a part of the ministry of Unchained Praises.